5 stars, you need a certain je ne sais quoi. Do I have a clear system? No, it's vibes based, and I reserve the right to change my mind all the time.
I don't think I've ever drunk champagne before breakfast before.
Now I've got a wonderful idea.
Hello and welcome back to the Movies for Breakfast podcast. I'm your host. My name is Christy, and today we're talking about everything I watched in February, including a couple of things from January. I didn't do a January wrap up because most of the movies I watched in January were 2025 releases, so I could do my 2025 tier ranking with as many releases as possible. So I just have a couple of stragglers that I did watch in January that were not new releases that I figured I'd just throw in and cover here. We have 20 movies to talk about. 4 of them are 2026 new releases. I'm going to go in chronological order of the movie release dates. So those will come last, but everything is in the chapter timestamps if you want to jump around and go to any particular movie that you're curious to hear my thoughts about. Also, shout out to my first ever reviewer on Apple Podcasts. I've got 10 5-star ratings and now 1 review. So thank you to Panic Pixie. And if anyone else wants to go ahead and leave me a lovely 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, I won't stop you. Same thing goes for Spotify, but you can't leave reviews there, so just give me a 5-star rating on Spotify, please. Follow me on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Obviously, subscribe, and comment on YouTube. You can go to moviesforbreakfast.com, moviesforbreakfast.com. That's my website. My links to everything are there, as well as a library of all my episodes. All right, let's get into it. We've got a lot to cover. If I'm looking at my phone, it's because I have my Letterboxd out with a list of all the movies, and I do have a little Movies for Breakfast sticker on my phone case. Thanks for noticing. I finally ordered business cards that I could hand out at the movie theater because I often meet people in person at the movie theater who I talk about my podcast to, and I'm like, that's my target audience, but I never have a card to give them. So I ordered business cards, no big deal, and they gave me stickers for free. The earliest release date first movie I'm going to talk about is Moonstruck from 1987, directed by Norman Jewison, starring Cher and Nicolas Cage. Wow, I love this movie. I also watched Vampire's Kiss with Nicolas Cage recently, and it really got me thinking that there's a whole side of Nicolas Cage that I never knew. Okay, growing up, Nicolas Cage to me was I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence, and that version of Nicolas Cage is distinctly asexual and kind of true neutral, and therefore completely uninteresting to me. Not that I don't love National Treasure, but as an adult, it kind of loses the appeal that it had in 6th grade. That being said, when I watched Vampire's Kiss, I realized that he might be one of the greatest actors of his generation, and I decided I have to explore more of his work. So I saw someone talking about Moonstruck, it's so quotable, so there's always clips of it, of Cher slapping him and saying, snap out of it. And I finally watched it and I loved it. I think it's billed as a romantic comedy, and it is a sort of classic romantic comedy. It's a very romantic movie. It takes place in New York, and Cher plays this Italian-American woman, Loretta, whose first husband passed away, and she is proposed to by this man who she doesn't really love, but she likes him okay, and she says sure. And then he has to fly out to Sicily to take care of his aging mother. While he's in Sicily, he insists that Loretta tracks down his estranged brother. His name is Johnny, his brother's name is Ronnie, and he insists that Loretta tracks down Ronnie to invite him to the wedding. And when Loretta finds Ronnie, played by Nicolas Cage, sorry about the sirens, the relationship between the two of them develops. It is fun. It's camp. Nicolas Cage is insane. They have great chemistry. Cher is ridiculously beautiful. Great acting from both of them. I don't care what anyone says. I'm not kidding. I genuinely think it was good acting. All of the side characters are very fleshed out and interesting as well. So all of Loretta's family members are part of the story. The moon is a character. You know how people say that New York City is a character in whatever movie it's in? The moon was also a character here. And Loretta's grandfather walking 5 dogs and urging them to bark at the moon in Italian. It just meant something to me. It's very memorable. It will definitely go down in my mind and in my memory as a movie that I loved. Again, completely unironic. I gave it 4 stars because 5 stars, you need a certain je ne sais quoi. Now that I'm looking, I don't know. All of my ratings, I don't know. Do I have a clear system? No, it's so hard to compare things. It's vibes based, and I reserve the right to change my mind all the time. That's Moonstruck. The next most recent movie that I watched is Sister Act from 1992, directed by Emile Ardolino, starring, of course, Whoopi Goldberg. This movie was like a staple of my childhood. I distinctly remember we had Sister Act on DVD, watched it a billion times. We wore this DVD down, okay? And I just realized I hadn't watched it in so long, and again, something came up like on social media or something that reminded me of this movie, and I genuinely could not remember anything about the plot. I just remember that as a kid I thought it was hilarious. So I decided to rewatch it. And you know what? It was a lot more earnest than I remember, probably because I didn't understand any of the more serious ideas in it as a kid, but it was also still hilarious. Whoopi Goldberg plays a singer who's like in this trio of singers in Reno, Nevada. I was going to say Reno, Las Vegas, in Reno, Nevada. And she gets into some trouble and has to go into hiding. And they place her in hiding at a convent, which could not be like further from the lifestyle and values that she's been living. She's been living glamorous, all the glitz and the glamour and the fun. And all of a sudden she's made to kind of strip herself of her identity and live in this convent with all of these white women who have their judgments about her and her character based on her style as a Black woman who lives glamorously. It's really heartfelt and beautiful. You explore like a lot of the side characters in the convent and all of their stories and personalities, and like the way that Whoopi's character helps them explore their individuality in a healthy way and not be so like Catholic guilted into oblivion and into non-existence as a woman, but rather to, you know, have like pride and dignity in who you are, as well as being part of a group. And most of this comes in the form of her leading the choir at the nunnery and teaching them to sing, because they really can't sing. It's good stuff. I love this movie. I gave this movie 5 stars, and I really feel like it reminded me what movies exist for, why movies exist. To tell stories about human beings. Yeah, it's kind of just like a hopeful and earnest story, along with Moonstruck, both kind of like hopeful and earnest and comforting to me. The next most recent movie I watched was Malcolm X from 1992, also directed by Spike Lee, of course. I had never seen this movie. I haven't seen a lot of Spike Lee movies, and I just felt like I need to catch up a little bit. Yeah, wow. This is definitely an epic. It was like 3.5 hours long. Took me multiple sittings to finish it, like with my full attention. It stars Denzel Washington as the titular Malcolm X. His acting in this is like completely transformative. He was Malcolm X to me. Like really, really, I can't believe he didn't win Best Actor that year. It shouldn't be surprising, but I'm still kind of baffled by that. It is considered to be like generally a faithful adaptation of the biography of Malcolm X, and pretty historically accurate in terms of like the themes and the general timeline of Malcolm X's life and legacy. But of course, some things are fictionalized, some things are exaggerated, some things are simplified, because despite its 3.5 hour long runtime, that's still never going to be enough time to tell the story of a person's life, of course. So as far as that runtime goes, I famously hate long runtimes, and I did struggle with this, but I get it. And I think if there's ever an excuse for a really long runtime, one of the good excuses for that is I was trying to tell the entire life story of one of the most influential figures in American history, and I was trying to tell it accurately and with complexity. Fair enough. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what I would have wanted condensed further. I understood where the runtime was coming from, so I won't dock it for that. I definitely learned some things about Malcolm X that I didn't know. I felt like I understood better the like progression of his politics and his perception in the public eye. Some of it was really heavy and just sad and depressing. I'm glad I watched it, and I think it is a really good example of how to do a biopic with respect for the person that you are representing, and also with respect for like how they affected other people and what they represent to people. It's a very big undertaking. It's very difficult to do. I think Spike Lee did it right. I think he nailed it. I do think I should read the biography now. Like now I kind of want to read the biography and see like quite literally the timeline and facts and understand better. Maybe I'll get around to that. I also thought Denzel Washington's pronunciation, this is like the least important part of his performance, okay? Like all of his performance is amazing. But as an Arab American watching, his pronunciation of Arabic when he was doing prayers was actually quite good, and I found that pretty impressive. I also came away from it, which I think was intended, really wanting to know more about his wife, Betty Shabazz. yeah, I'd really like to know more about her life and her story after Malcolm was killed, because the movie kind of ends there. But I feel like there's a lot left to be told about her story. And I did appreciate the way that I feel like Spike Lee did delve into Malcolm X's views on women and kind of patriarchy within the Nation of Islam to an extent. But like, there's only so much you can cover. I think there's a lot more to be said about the women around Malcolm X and particularly his wife. I would like to read more about her. But yeah, I really think it is like kind of a perfect movie for what it set out to do. And if you can like buck up and sit down and watch it, even if you have to like take a break and watch it in 2 evenings, maybe you could watch like the first half one night, second half the next night. I think that's fine. That's what I did. It's definitely worth it. Okay, the next movie in chronological order of release was Bring It On from 2000, directed by Peyton Reed, starring Kirsten Dunst and Gabrielle Union. Okay, wow. This was another movie from my childhood. Loved this movie. I was obsessed. I remembered the baseline outline of the story being that like the white cheerleaders were stealing choreography from the black cheerleaders, but I didn't remember or really appreciate how explicit that storyline was. Like, this was ahead of its time in 2000 for like a teen movie to so just like matter-of-factly have cultural appropriation be the core social conflict of the story. I think that was really cool of them. I think cheerleading is metal as fuck. I appreciate the respect that this movie kind of paid to the competitive cheerleading world. Never in my life did I question that competitive cheerleading was a sport, because I was raised on Bring It On and I knew what was going on in those gyms was crazy. I've also heard from like interviews more recently, or maybe it was from her memoir, I don't know, but Gabrielle Union has talked about her influence on this story and how Gabrielle Union's character was supposed to be like less sympathetic and more of a stereotype of like an angry black woman, and that she insisted on some changes to the script and to the character to turn her into a more like real human being, who in the movie I think balances beautifully being like a gracious leader and also being like, yeah, you did do wrong to us and you should be sorry. You know what I mean? It's just perfect. The balance is perfect. The characters make sense. It feels like a real argument that teenage girls would have with each other. I love the character Missy, who like transfers to the rich school and kind of gives Kirsten Dunst a wake-up call about their cheers being stolen. It is, I will say, it is extremely camp. Like I think I showed this to my friends who had never seen it before. And I remember being like, I'm pretty sure this movie, like it's very camp and silly and like you gotta buy in. And they were like, okay. And then when we put it on, I was like, okay, yeah, it's extremely camp. And you just have to be along for the ride. And if you're along for the ride and you're down, it's good fun. It's good teen fun. I love this movie. I think this movie aged beautifully. I think it deserves its status as a cult classic, and may it live on. I gave this movie 4 stars. And then just to keep the Kirsten Dunst ball rolling, the next movie is Marie Antoinette from 2006, directed by Sofia Coppola. Similar to Spike Lee, Sofia Coppola is just like a director I was thinking about, and I was like, I don't feel like I've done my homework on Sofia Coppola, even though she's so omnipresent. Do you know what I mean? Like, she's just one of those directors that has a distinct signature and a style and is known for it, and I just didn't feel like I totally knew it well enough myself, so I was like, let me just do a little bit of Sofia Coppola watching. I really like this movie. I was pleasantly surprised by this movie. I think the reason it came up is because people were making comparisons from Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights 2026 movie to Sofia Coppola's 2006 Marie Antoinette. Wow, exactly 20 years predating it. And I wanted to see like what exactly those comparisons were about, because I knew the aesthetics and the design was similar and worse in Wuthering Heights. But this movie is very sensitive and soft in a way I didn't really expect. Like, I feel like the impression I had going in was that it was going to be, again, like campy and fun, but I didn't expect for it to be so human, and I actually really liked it. She paints a picture of Marie Antoinette as a teenage girl who was married off very young, left her home, entered a whole new world alone at Versailles, and found comfort in riches. The way that she finds comfort in clothes and shoes and games and ribbons and parties and gossip, it doesn't minimize the like evil of the French aristocracy living in this insane, lavish luxury while the people starved. It like fully is aware of that, but it takes like a very human approach to why is this girl like this? You know, she is shallow, you know, she is self-centered. But you think about how, like, historically, the idea of Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake, you would think that Marie Antoinette herself orchestrated the starvation of the French people, when really, of course, you know, it was her husband and his advisors and the men of politics who did so. She is an icon who represents the vanity, the ridiculous spending, the disgusting, overindulgent wealth of the aristocracy and the royals at the same time as people were starving. So I don't think that Sofia Coppola is like, guys, Marie Antoinette was misunderstood. He's just a girl. But at the same time, she does kind of explore how that disconnect happens and how does this girl who was raised in luxury, no idea of anything of the real world, and then plopped into this new world with even more insane standards of luxury, surrounded by people she doesn't know who gossip about her and don't like her. How does she come to indulge so ridiculously? And it doesn't feel as ridiculous when you see it from that perspective. I also felt, I don't know, it felt very The Great Gatsby to me, where people look at the aesthetics of it and like reverse the message of the story completely by indulging in glorifying those aesthetics, when really like the author and the story is a cautionary tale, or at least has a critical lens. I will always remember reading The Great Gatsby for the first time in like middle school, and the scene where Daisy cries into the shirts. I don't know, that was like one of the first moments I can pinpoint where I was like, literature means something, because I completely understood why Daisy was crying into those shirts. And I couldn't think of a better way to like express that feeling. And I just got it. To this day, sometimes I'm watching something and I'm like, that's Daisy Buchanan crying into the shirts. And for me, Marie Antoinette the movie was Marie Antoinette, the person, crying into the custom corsets and shoes. And I understood it. I also think if you're gonna do it. And Sofia Coppola did it. It is a delight to look at. Every scene, all of the sets, all of the costumes, the hair, the makeup, architecture, the gardens. I mean, everything about it is ornate. I think that's the word that kept coming to mind. Like, it felt so French Versailles royalty in the sense that it was so ornate, detailed, trimmed. T's are crossed and I's are dotted in a way that a lot of current movies do not feel. Wuthering Heights being the perfect example, where everything felt like broad strokes. I do acknowledge, and I say in my video about Wuthering Heights, that I liked the set design and I liked the architecture. But even some of the interior design and certainly the costume design felt lazy, and it didn't feel as intricate. Intricate is another good descriptor for Marie Antoinette. It didn't feel as intricate as the work on Marie Antoinette. On Marie Antoinette, every ribbon was in the place it needed to be in. No one told me my bandana was falling. The upholstery on all of the cushions in every carriage, the curtains in the carriage, like just everything was perfect. And it was so overwhelming and so overdone, it kind of made you feel sick, like too much cake, ironically. You know what I mean? Everything has a crown molding, and the crown molding has a crown molding, and the wallpaper has wallpaper on it. And that felt perfect. That felt very Versailles. That felt like a great visual representation of excess, of overindulgence. I thought the partying scenes were great and very real, somewhat reminiscent of the show, The Great, with Elle Fanning and Nicholas Hoult, another great kind of liberal take on historical fiction on screen. I also loved Rose Byrne in this. I thought Rose Byrne was great. Very much found Marie Antoinette relatable in the sense that she never wanted to hang out with her husband or talk business. She literally just wanted to hang out with the girls, drink, gamble, shop, get horizontal. That felt super normal and human to me, especially when I was 19 and 20. So I gave Marie Antoinette 4 stars. Next up is Taken from 2008, directed by Pierre Morel and starring, of course, Liam Neeson. Okay, so I had never seen Taken before, but of course, like, I know the iconic role by Liam Neeson. I know the iconic, I will find you and I will kill you. One of the most confusing things about this movie for me is Liam Neeson's accent. I'm just really not sure the whole time, like, what it is or what it's meant to be. Maybe that's a personal problem. I don't know. Listen, did I enjoy it as an action movie? Yes. I love action movies. In terms of action pacing and action sequences, I think it was great. I think Liam Neeson is absolutely lovely, but it was kind of shockingly, like, right wing. I don't know. Like, I don't know if in 2008 it was received that way by some of the viewers. I was 8, so what do I know? I was 8 or 9. The way that violence against young women is framed primarily from the point of view of a male hero fighting to stop it feels really male and kind of conservative rather than being framed from the perspective of the women who suffer the abuse. And in a way that has like always been the case in media, except occasional feminist creations of the past and until recently. But that doesn't make it any less unpleasant to watch. And then also, of course, like the politics of all of the bad guys are foreign. They're all Albanian in France. Felt really pointed. Then, of course, some of the bad guys are also Arab, and that felt really pointed. Just certainly rubbed me the wrong way on many fronts, and I don't think I'm alone in that feeling. Yeah, I don't know. I felt like Liam Neeson really was the main character, and everything was about him, and it wasn't really about his daughter suffering like some horrifying trauma and abuse, or many of the other women who suffered worse, or her friend who, spoiler, dies. And everything is framed as like, oh, these silly girls are so irresponsible. Yeah, it's very victim blamey. His ex-wife is like an ex-wife bitch character who's just really framed as being like unreasonable and mean, when I think much of what she's saying is perfectly sensible. He's framed as like the victim of his ex-wife and his daughter icing him out, when really like it seems like he abandoned his daughter and only recently has tried to get back in her life. And he's like, come on, why is everybody being mean to me? So there's a lot of things not to like about this movie. If you told me this director had a nasty divorce, refused to pay child support, and then wonders why his kids don't call him, I would not be surprised, because that's the vibe of this movie. However, I gave it 3 stars because I did enjoy the action and I did enjoy Liam Neeson's monologues. Okay, another movie that I felt kind of meh about is The Martian from 2015, directed by Ridley Scott, starring I can't believe I just forgot. Starring Matt Damon. I was thinking the name Matthew, and I was like, Matthew Damon? So this is an adaptation of a novel by Andy Weir, who also wrote Project Hail Mary, the adaptation of which, starring Ryan Gosling, is coming out very soon. I read Project Hail Mary because when I don't know what to read, I just look up like lists of upcoming book to movie adaptations. I just read those, and I love science fiction. But I found Andy Weir very just okay, just proficient, sort of following a very transparent storytelling formula, definitely writing novels with the intention of adapting them into screenplays with as little friction as possible, so it does feel like you're reading a screenplay, which I don't like in a novel. What I like about Andy Weir, what I'll say I think is good, and I'm talking about him generally because I haven't read The Martian, but from watching The Martian and reading Project Hail Mary, he has a very earnest, positive, optimistic take on humanity, when science fiction most often has a really fatalistic take on humanity. So that's refreshing, and I definitely think some like earnest hope core wouldn't hurt anyone right now. But it can also feel a little bit shallow for that reason, where I'm just like, okay, yeah. And then everyone held hands and sang Kumbaya, you know? But in general, I don't dislike that about him. I think that's nice. And then another good thing I'll say about Andy Weir is that he is a nerd, like a real science nerd, and the science part of his science fiction is always really detailed and logical, and even if it's completely fabricated, it's like internal logic system is consistent. I really dislike when science fiction is actually fantasy, but it's billed as science fiction, and it kind of like blurs the two. I don't know. I shouldn't say I really dislike that, because it depends. Like the 3-body problem, for example, I would say does that, and I really like it. It's complicated. But if something is really being built to me as like science fiction spaceship stuff, I want it to make sense. And I want it to feel like I can suspend my disbelief and be like, okay, like if a scientist told me that this is what was happening, I'd be like, sure. And Andy Weir does that well. So I appreciate that. I think that's a very creative and interesting way to do it. Good for him. It was a perfectly satisfactory science fiction movie. Nothing special, nothing particularly memorable, but cute. I think I gave it 3 stars. Next up, one of my favorites and the most memorable that I watched in this past month, Crimson Peak from 2015, directed by Guillermo del Toro. Oh my gosh, Crimson Peak. Okay, I have so much to say about Crimson Peak. I thought about doing a full episode on it, and maybe I still will, but let me just give some context. So this has also come up a lot in the conversation about Wuthering Heights, because Crimson Peak is a sort of adaptation, I would say more like loosely inspired by Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, the older sister of Emily Bronte, who wrote Wuthering Heights. Now, I am a Bronte stan. I love the Bronte sisters. I have yet to read Anne Bronte's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, but I have it right over there. I'm gonna read it, okay? And I love Jane Eyre, and upon second read, I love Wuthering Heights too. I just think they're brilliant, and I really connect with like the gothic storytelling vibe. So Jane Eyre, if you don't know, is very loosely about a young woman who goes to work as a governess in a wealthy man's manor, and it turns out that there's a lot of weird, spooky, haunted ghost stuff happening in the house, and he's hiding things from her. But it's also a romance between this wealthy gentleman of the house and this young woman. Crimson Peak takes that idea and makes something very new and different out of it. It's certainly not Jane Eyre as told by Charlotte Bronte, and it's not billing itself to be. I would have had no idea that this was inspired by Jane Eyre had people not brought it up in conversation during the craze about Wuthering Heights. And I think that I say that as like a credit to the movie. I think that shows that Guillermo del Toro really took inspiration and then made something his own, which is something that a lot of people, including myself, have said that Emerald Fennell should have done. Another reason I really wanted to watch this movie is because I'm preparing a lot of really in-depth content about Frankenstein, both the classic book by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. I read both the 1818 and 1831 versions, and I'm going to give you a detailed book summary just like I did with Wuthering Heights, and then I'm going to talk about Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein from 2025, starring Jacob Elordi. You know, if I had a nickel for every time I made an in-depth series on a Gothic literature adaptation from 2025 starring Jacob Elordi that received widespread negative criticism, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Right? I, like many other people, was a bit disappointed by Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein because to me, Guillermo del Toro is like a Gothic icon. I think Guillermo del Toro is one of the most Gothic directors out there. Pan's Labyrinth is one of my favorite movies of all time. Doesn't get much more Gothic than that. And somehow I had just never seen Crimson Peak, and it fit the bill exactly. So now, having seen Crimson Peak and having seen Frankenstein, I have even more validated my initial reaction to Frankenstein, which was that this is not Guillermo del Toro's best work. This is not what I expect from Guillermo del Toro. And as much as I want to just say like, oh, it was Netflix, it's Netflix's fault, Netflix ruins everything, which is probably true to an extent, I'm going to get into that in a lot more detail when I talk about Frankenstein. So I don't want to like go down too much of a tangent on that here. I just want to say that like Crimson Peak gave me really, really good context to compare Frankenstein and kind of hold it to that rubric of execution, because I think it was absolutely beautifully executed. Costume design, set design, with period pieces, costume and set are really important. I mean, it's always important, but with period pieces, especially, I feel like anything Gothic, aesthetics are so critical because even on paper, aesthetics are a huge part of the story. Vibes are a huge part of the story. The darkness of it, the romance of it is really important, and you have to feel transported in order to buy into the ghost stuff. Do you know what I mean? It can't be like a Bridgerton-esque modern day thing, because then I'm not buying the ghosts. I'm not expressing that well. All of the textures of the clothes and the linens felt really soft and fluffy and old and velvety. Felt the same way about that in Marie Antoinette. Whereas in Wuthering Heights and in Bridgerton, everything is so shiny. Everything looks like polyester. Everything looks like plastic. As soon as you show me like a shiny plasticky fabric, I'm in at least 2010, okay? I'm not in Edwardian England. I'm not in Victorian England or Georgian England. It's not going to to do that. I really enjoyed the costume design in Crimson Peak. I enjoyed the set design, the cinematography. The special effects for the ghost stuff were okay. They were fine by me. The acting was fabulous. God, I love Tom Hiddleston. Tom Hiddleston is so good in this movie. Jessica Chastain can do no wrong. I'm obsessed with her. The actress who plays the main character, Edith Cushing, her name is Mia, and this is me following the pronunciation guide on Letterboxd, Wasikowska. Oh, okay. The reason she was so freaking familiar is because she's Alice in Alice in Wonderland. I was wondering why she's so familiar. Yeah, Tim Burton's 2010 Alice in Wonderland, she plays Alice. I knew her face. Like I said, this is inspired by Jane Eyre, but it is not Jane Eyre, so there's no Jane Eyre character, but Edith Cushing is basically Jane Eyre. She's very Charlotte Bronte. She's very ambitious. She's a writer. She tries to get published, and men in the industry, underestimate her and treat her poorly, but she has a really loving and supportive father. So I really enjoyed that character as kind of an homage to not only Jane from Jane Eyre, but also Charlotte Bronte herself. And I found it to be like a very loving and respectful homage compared to She Who Shall Not Be Named, because I'm sick of saying her name. I watched it during the daytime because I was scared, because it's technically classed as like a horror thriller. I'm glad I watched it during the day, but I wouldn't say it's horror. I'd say it's more of like a psychological thriller with paranormal stuff, depending on how scared you are of like ghosts. It's definitely dark and tragic, but it is also romantic. I just thought it was really beautiful, and this is the Guillermo del Toro that I love, where I feel like he's such a bleeding heart. He's so sensitive, he's so emotional, and that's not a bad thing. That's a style of filmmaking that I really like. Be emotional, be dramatic, be a soap opera. I love it. Absolutely adored Crimson Peak. I'm so glad I watched it. It's not super highly rated. Its average rating on Letterboxd is 3.5 stars. I gave it 5 stars. I just really loved this movie. Okay, next up is Creed from 2015, directed by Ryan Coogler. I think just all the buzz of Sinners on the awards run that it's on right now, with Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan being super like visible, and I'm constantly being reminded of them. I realized I had never seen Creed, and I was kind of curious. I've also never seen Rocky. Here come the, oh my God, I can't believe you've never seen Rocky. I've never seen Rocky, and this is a continuation of the Rocky universe, with Sylvester Stallone playing Rocky Balboa in more of like a supporting role. So I knew I was going to be kind of like missing some of the context because of that, but I was also not willing to go watch Rocky before this. I promise I will watch Rocky eventually. One of my best friends is from Philadelphia and is moving back to Philly soon, so I feel that I must watch Rocky in honor of that. But for now, I was like, let me just check out Creed. Listen, I don't like fighting. I'm squeamish about it. I don't like watching men punch each other or like punch stuff. It really makes me tense up. And that's not me making like a moral judgment on it. I just can't help that that's how I like feel about it, So I really kind of didn't care that much about the fighting stuff. But what I did care about and really enjoy was the romance, which was kind of the B plot. But Michael B. Jordan, who plays Adonis or Donnie Creed, he meets his neighbor Bianca, played by Tessa Thompson, who is a musical artist, and they live in the same building and they get to know each other. And she is like a super cool, independent, tough nut to crack local Philly girl, and he's like an out-of-towner, kind of square guy who slowly gains her trust and wins her over. I loved their dynamic. I loved their story, and I thought they were both so beautiful. And I have to say that I think the way that Ryan Coogler does romance in general, the like multiple romantic plot lines in Sinners, are some of his strongest storytelling aspects. I love the way Ryan Coogler does love stories. I think he's so romantic. He loves women. He loves and admires women so much, and that really comes through. And I love to watch romance written by a man who adores women. It's just good. And the reason I bring all that up is because I saw a headline that Ryan Coogler is writing a romantic comedy. I have to assume it's starring Michael B. Jordan. Please be starring Michael B. Jordan. But regardless, I really look forward to that, and I do think Ryan Coogler should get into romance more, or even if he's not going to do it as a genre film, I just enjoy that aspect in general of his films. I think he's really good at it. Other than that, did I love Creed? No, I'm not the target audience, but that's not to say it's a bad movie. I just am clearly not who it was made for. So I gave it 3.5 stars. Suki's getting antsy here. She says hi. Next up is Zootopia from 2016, directed by Byron Howard and Rich Moore. Okay, Zootopia. Why did I watch Zootopia? Obviously, Zootopia 2 came out. I still haven't seen Zootopia 2. And then I was hanging out with some friends, and it came out that one of us had not ever seen Zootopia in the first place, and we kind of freaked out and just had to put it on. And wow, it was a great time. That was a very fun night. It was magical. Is it propaganda? Yes, I think so, but it's also nuanced. I don't know. I loved Jenny Slate as Bellwether. I knew that voice. I knew that little rasp immediately. She's such a great voice actor. I gave it 3.5 stars. I thought it was fun. I had a really good time watching it. I will be watching Zootopia 2. I don't have much else to say about Zootopia. Sorry. Okay. Then we have Wind River from 2017, directed by Taylor Sheridan. This is a lot less well-known of a movie, so let me just give some context about this. This is one of the ones that I actually watched the longest time ago from right now, so my exact memory of the plot is less clear. Here's the synopsis. An FBI agent teams with the town's veteran game tracker to investigate a murder that occurred on a Native American reservation. So yeah, this takes place on a Native American reservation out in North Dakota, somewhere really, really cold. It's based on a true story. I was interested in this because I was interested in an exploration of Native American oppression and injustice in terms of policing and investigation of crime and violence against women. I didn't love it. It stars Elizabeth Olsen as the FBI agent, who's kind of the typical FBI local disconnect, where she's kind of, out of her depth and needs to gain the trust of the locals to actually work with them. Jeremy Renner is the local game tracker who teams up with her to help her. So it ends up being a story of these two white people who are investigating this violent crime against a Native American woman on a Native American reservation, and it just felt very centered on the white point of view. It felt a little bit white saviory. Jeremy Renner's character, he just had a lot of one-liners that were very, very silly. Truly just made us laugh. Metaphors about hunting game versus hunting a killer. And ultimately it was really bleak and dark, and that's good in a way. Suki, you need to be normal. That's good in a way to, unflinchingly depict the realities of violence and injustice, but given the point of view and tone that it took, it didn't feel appropriate. It felt exploitative of trauma and pain. Spoiler alert, maybe, but this movie graphically depicted rape, and I found that really disturbing, unnecessary, gratuitous, and very male perspective. I've talked about the portrayal of rape and sexual assault a lot on my podcast in discussing Sorry Baby, After the Hunt, and other movies. And yeah, I think this is a really good example of on the surface the message was right, but in execution it felt really hypocritical and indulgent in depicting violence against women in a way that didn't sit right with me and didn't feel right to watch. So unfortunately this was a miss for me. I gave it 3 stars. I don't think that's right. I'm switching that to 2. Then I finally watched Free Solo from 2018, directed by Jimmy Chin and Elizabeth Chai Vesarhelyi. I had never seen Free Solo. This came up because recently Alex Honnold, the protagonist of this documentary, who is a free soloist, which means that he climbs things without any kind of gear or ropes or protection. He made the news because he scaled a building. He free soloed a building, and everyone was kind of debating the ethics of that because he's married with kids and doing something incredibly dangerous and risking his life for sport, essentially. People were talking all about his wife and her perspective on it and whether she had agency in the situation, all of this. So I was kind of curious. I thought it was an interesting debate, and so I watched Free Solo, and let me just say I went into this documentary very prepared to have nothing but disdain for Alex Honnold. I definitely have I have an aversion to pastimes or sports that are unnecessarily life-threatening. I think there's something really dark about that and really weird about that. So I went in prepared to just completely hate him, and I didn't. I thought this was a really fair documentary. I think it showed him in a very fair way, where a lot of the people around him are really blunt about him as a person and say Alex is not a particularly warm or fuzzy guy. Whatever preconceptions I had about like, you've got to be kind of messed up to be into this, like, yeah, that proved true. We get into like a little bit of his childhood and his relationship to his parents, which I think was really important to understanding like the psychology of this kind of risk taking. What I also really liked about this documentary is it shows a ton about his relationship with his girlfriend who became his wife later, and about like her relationship to free soloing and how she sees it. And I think that dynamic was very cool to explore. I walked away from it with the same kind of feeling about free soloing as a sport, which is that it's ridiculous to risk your life for sport. I actually walked away feeling that even more because in the movie they talk about all of these people they know and were friends with who died free soloing quite recently. And like when I say that I love Formula One, a lot of times the reaction from people who like are not familiar with it is like, oh, but that's so dangerous. And of course it is dangerous. It always will be dangerous. But in terms of fatalities, like it's been a long time since we've had any. And the way that they were talking about it made it seem like people are just dying left and right doing this sport. And that to me was like really insane. It's not worth it. Climb it with a rope. Hey, just climb it with the rope. I don't care. As much as I have a lot of empathy for people like Alex, and I completely understand that mindset of like going to the extreme and needing to feel something basically, I still walked away with the same kind of judgment on it. If anyone was wondering my take on the building thing, I think once you have kids, it's insane and really messed up. Yeah, I don't think there's any defense for it. Imagine your kids losing you and they have to find out it's because you did a sport that threatened your life for fun and fame and money. I mean, I just think it's really messed up. There's something really dark and wrong with him. He's a very sad person. It left me feeling weird, but it's a very good documentary, I think. So, okay. Next up is Shiva Baby from 2020, directed by, and I think written and, directed by Emma Seligman. I thought for sure Rachel Sennett directed it. Okay, Rachel Sennett executive produced and starred in Shiva Baby, but apparently she did not write or direct it. I was under the impression that she also wrote and directed it, so that's my bad. It was written and directed by Emma Seligman. I think this is really what like launched Rachel Sennett into a film and TV career. As far as I know, this is when I first like really heard about her. For whatever reason, I had just never seen Shiva Baby, but I was thinking a lot about Rachel Sennett after seeing The Moment, so I was like, let me watch Shiva Baby. I liked it. I gave it 3 stars. If you don't know, the premise is that the main character played by Rachel Sennett, Danielle, is graduating college, has no idea what she's doing with her life, and she kind of gets stuck at this Shiva, which if you don't know is sort of like a traditional Jewish wake. She gets stuck at this Shiva with her parents, all of her parents' friends, kids who she grew up with, aunts, uncles, cousins, and has several awkward encounters with current and past romantic partners at the Shiva. It turns into this like pressure cooker of awkwardness and drama. I really liked certain things about this. I thought there were like really earnest moments that actually made me tear up, where Danielle is like forced to confront her sense of self and self-worth on a really fundamental level. Spoiler alert, you can skip 30 seconds if you don't want to hear this. But there's a point in the movie where she looks at her mom and she says, "Mommy, are you disappointed in me?" I got so choked up because like as someone figuring out their life in their 20s, I feel like I've really had those moments of like, am I embarrassing? Am I a failure? And it's just like a really vulnerable thing to think and feel and to say out loud. And then her mom's reaction to it is so heartwarming. That kind of saved the whole movie for me, that moment, because otherwise it was too, everyone sucks here, there's no point. But it had that and a couple other moments as well of like earnest love and support to balance out the like absurdity, comedy, darkness, horror of embarrassment that was the rest of the movie. So I liked it. I didn't love it. It's a good take on a complicated, unlikable female protagonist, for sure. But ultimately it didn't like totally connect the whole way through. It had moments that it resonated with me, and then a lot more moments where I was just kind of like, whatever, I don't care, you know? But I gave it 3 stars, which to me is like not bad. Next up, we've got The Worst Person in the World from 2021, directed by Joachim Trier, who you might recognize from Sentimental Value from 2025. So Sentimental Value was the first Joachim Trier movie that I watched, and I just like absolutely loved it, as did most other people who saw it last year. And I knew about him before this, and I knew about this movie before this because my mom had watched The Worst Person in the World and maybe another one of his movies and had been like recommending it to me forever and saying how I had to watch it, and I just never got around to it. Mother knows best. I finally watched it at my friend's house with like 6 people. We were all hanging out after like a weekend of a lot going on, and it was just the vibe of like, let's put a movie on. And I feel like whenever I'm in that situation with like a mixed group of people, some really close friends, some newer friends, we always end up putting on something kind of like dumb and then not watching it. But no one really had any ideas, and I pitched this movie. I was like, what about this? Are you guys down? I think it's kind of more of a serious movie, but it could be fun. And everyone was down. Everyone was in the mood. And so we put it on, and I'm so glad we did, because now it has become one of those moments where like, this is why movies are so special, because sometimes the people that you watch a movie with, it creates like a new memory, a new shared memory and experience, and an opportunity to like analyze and talk about social dynamics with people that just brings you all closer and gives you something to connect about. So it was a really cool, beautiful experience to watch it with people. I loved it. It takes place in Oslo. The main character is played again by Renate Reinsve, who plays the main character in Sentimental Value. And she's just a revelation. She is so special. I think she might be one of my favorite actresses ever. She is unbelievable. Like, I don't know. It's hard to like put into words, but the way that she performs on screen always makes me feel something so deeply. I feel so deeply connected to her expressions, her voice, her body language, just amazing. And I think she has a really good chemistry and connection with Joachim Trier as a writer and director as well, that I can see they have a shared unified vision about the character and about the meaning of the story. It just really comes through in the work as very deeply considered. I would say this story, compared to Sentimental Value, it's a lot more focused on her relationships with male romantic partners than it is on her relationships with her family members. And so just for that reason, I feel like Sentimental Value holds a more special place in my heart, because the way that the relationship between the sisters is so central was really special and personal to me. Whereas in The Worst Person in the World, it was a bit more cynical and a bit more focused on romantic relationships, which is less special to me. But no less realistic, slice of life, human, documentary style, beautiful, honest, amazing. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. Next up was like the most random Netflix suggestion just popped up, and I said, okay. And it is Mr. Malcolm's List from 2022, directed by Emma Hawley-Jones. This is essentially Bridgerton premium movie form. I actually had a good time with this. So the premise of this movie, it's set in vaguely Victorian era England during the social season amongst the aristocratic families. The most eligible bachelor, his name is Jeremy Malcolm, and he is notoriously picky. Like, he keeps going on dates with women and then not pursuing them further, and it's quite taboo for the social norms at the time. He makes the mistake of publicly snubbing Julia, who is a very proud girl, and because he like takes her out on this very public date and then doesn't see her again, she has been humiliated by him, even though that's not his intention. Now everyone's gossiping and saying how embarrassing it is for her, and it like kind of hurts her reputation and chances at finding someone else, even though this is now her like 4th season out in society. And so she wants to get revenge on him by having her best friend from the countryside, who comes from a poor family, come to town for the remainder of the social season in London and trick him into falling in love with her based on intel that she has. Very John Tucker Must Die, now that I'm saying it. And then break his heart for revenge. Okay? So then her best friend comes to town, and she and her cousin and her best friend, her cousin, who is a very, in my opinion, gay-coded man, scheme to trick Mr. Malcolm. Of course, the best friend and Malcolm maybe have a more genuine connection than intended. Also very mean girls, and chaos ensues. I just thought this was really fun. Like, period piece or not, it was a very early 2000s teen movie dynamics of like trickery and plotting and scheming and secrets, and I loved that. I thought the characters were really fun and well developed. Like, as silly and lighthearted as it was, I actually think it was done perfectly for the genre and audience it was intended for. I think this is like a good Hallmark style movie. I didn't love the costumes or set, but that's okay. Yeah, I had a really fun time with this. Solid out of Netflix. Not bad at all. All right, next up. This is the final pre-2026 movie on the list. So then we have Saltburn from 2023, directed by Emerald Fennell. I don't even want to talk about Saltburn. I've talked so much about Emerald Fennell recently. I just don't want to do it anymore. I didn't like this movie. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. Okay, so now let's get into the 2026 releases. First one that I watched at home on Netflix was People We Meet on Vacation, adapted from an Emily Henry novel, directed by Brett Haley and starring Emily Bader and Tom Blythe. I like Emily Henry. I don't know if I love her, but I like her. And I think she's like one of the more reasonable, let me say like ethical, politically aligned romance authors out there today. At worst, harmless. At best, good. So I was excited about this. I think I might have read People We Meet on Vacation, but most of the time if I'm reading Emily Henry, it is, no pun intended, like a beach read situation or like an audiobook that I fall asleep to. And then when I wake up, I don't really rewind to see what I missed. So it's more of like a soothing, just like entertainment thing than a memorable read that I actually like process. So I don't remember basically anything about this book. I thought the movie was okay. I had the same problems with it that a lot of people had, which is that the obstacles to the two love interests being together were not strong enough and did not make enough sense, and therefore them not being together and yet seemingly being like pretty obviously in love from very early on just comes off as really destructive, selfish, and unlikable behavior. A lot of fans of the book have said that the characters in the book make more sense as to why they're not together and therefore are more likable and not as like just kind of destructive and awful. That being said, I did think that Emily Bader was lovely. I know a lot of people found her really annoying. I didn't. I did think she was cute and fun and likable and beautiful. I found Tom Blythe pretty boring, but like also that's his character, the way it was written. So I don't know how much of that is really on him. I thought it was genuinely sweet when they, got together, and I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I think it just needed a bit of script doctoring to make the stakes make more logical sense, which is often the problem in romance and romantic comedy. Okay, then of course I saw Wuthering Heights in theaters, and I've made it very clear publicly that I hated that movie. Not going to waste any more time talking about it here. Definitely go check out my multiple videos on Wuthering Heights, one on the book and one on the movie if you want to hear more of my thoughts about it. But yeah, I really, really didn't like it. I think it's harmful. I think it's bad. I think it's lazy. I think Emerald Fennell is consistently a mediocre and blatantly hateful filmmaker. That's my take. And then I saw The Moment, which is a mockumentary ideated by Charlie XCX and directed by Aiden Zamiri, starring Charlie XCX as a kind of exaggerated, fictionalized version of herself at the peak of Brat success, at the end of Brat summer, fighting with her label about what to do next, basically, and gearing up for the Brat tour. Thematically, it explores a lot of the conflicts that Charlie has talked about publicly since Brat, and even in the lyrics of Brat songs themselves. The conflict between artistry and capitalism, artistry and fame, artistry and ego. Just like, I think it was really honest emotionally. It was self-deprecating in a way that felt honest as well. Her worst fear of who she is or who she could become. I thought the acting was really great. I thought it was funny. I thought the cinematography was great. I really loved it. I had a great time. And last week's episode is on The Moment. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts in detail, you can go check out my episode on The Moment with my friend Steph, who went to see the movie with me, and we cover it in more detail. I went into this prepared to like it, and I did like it. And I gave it 4.5 stars. And then the last movie I'm going to talk about in my February wrap-up is Pillion, directed by Harry Leighton, starring Alexander Skarsgård and Harry Melling. Now, Harry Melling, you might not recognize his name, but he is most famous for playing Dudley Dursley in the Harry Potter films. Well, he's all grown up now. He certainly looks different, and I think he was great in this. I liked this movie. It's almost like a delayed sexual coming of age for Harry's character, Colin, who lives with his very, very loving and sweet, humble parents. He's super close with his parents. His mom, who has cancer and is pretty terminally ill, is like really pushing to set him up with someone and see him partnered and with a boyfriend. And he finds himself, instead of in this like very cutesy, family friendly, loving relationship, he falls into his first BDSM dynamic relationship with a like biker, Alexander Skarsgård, Ray. And he's very naive and new to it all. And the dynamic of it is really interesting. It's a very explicit movie, but it's also not done for shock value, I don't think. I think it has like a good intention behind it and a genuine like perspective. I thought that the character Colin was extremely lovable, and you really root for him and you really want him to have the best, the same way that his parents want the best for him. And so that really is the strength of the movie, I think, because you watch him kind of like navigate this relationship that he was not necessarily prepared for and is not necessarily being fully respected in. And the line between like what is consensual disrespect, I guess, as part of the dynamic, and what is on a human level just like unfair behavior is a really interesting exploration, I think, in the story. I found it really sad and sweet, occasionally funny, but mostly sad and sweet. I really hope that Harry Melling does more big roles in the future. I'd love to see more of him. I thought he was amazing and so lovable. I gave it 4 stars. And that is it. Those are the 20 films I saw in February or in January that were not covered in my tier ranking video. Lots of gems in there. Some nostalgic favorites, some new favorites, some duds, and a healthy handful of brand new releases. Let me know what you thought about any of these movies, if you've seen them. Let me know if there's something that you think I should watch this month. As always, thank you so much for supporting the podcast and listening to me talk and talk and talk. Please do leave me a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And I'll be back as soon as possible. Have a good week. Watch some movies. Stay sane out there. I don't know.